I left the city, I've been browsing, treading water that they drowning. My head on the swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 174 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Dad FF. You guys can tell I'm excited for this one. Just got back from Vegas. You know, we're looking at things to, we're doing a little bit of gambling, having a little bit of fun. And then you look at, in the dynasty aspect, John, the least gamble there is what we're going to talk about tonight, baby. It's that 1 year punt. I keep looking at these and I started doing them with guys in the Patreon, and man, it's just reinvigorated on how fun that year one punt is.
Vegas, baby. That's fun. This is actually a lot of fun. You're going to be entertained like you're at Vegas, but you are placing a sure bet with the 1 year punt. So I can't wait to break this down. I think you and I have now been doing this for a little while, and we've kind of perfected it. We have a pretty rock solid strategy. And some of these lineups that we're starting to see for people that are taking our advice are crazy.
Well, and I think that's the coolest thing, John, is like right now I'm seeing so many people, all the graphics that I posted with Thanos and all the things that I've done over the years. Now other people are starting to post them and they're like, yo, this is the lineup that we got through Smash Accept. Like we're in year 2, year 3 of some of these rebuilds, some of these 1 year punts that we've been teaching. And like guys are showing these rosters off and they're pretty close, if not better than some of the ones that we're doing. And guys want to be a part of that. Right now I'm doing we offer this in the Patreon, in the VIP services. There's guys where we will do a draft assistance with you. And there's 2 guys, Andrew and Rich. We're doing them right now. One guy through 8 rounds has 11 firsts. The other guy through 7 rounds has 7 firsts. And I
love it.
I was like, all right, we did the blueprint for the rebuild. Now let's talk about a blueprint for that year one punt. We've been doing it. Now we're starting to perfect it. And for me, it's like, there's some core assets to it, right? Like number one is we got to acquire those core assets. So many guys think year one punt means trade back, and that's it. And that's not all there is. Like you look at some of these teams, and I've done 5 of them now in the last 2 years, and the ones that are the best are where I got 1 or 2 of those core assets. One of those guys where, you look at round 1 and you talk about the quarterbacks, you talk about Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, and Burrow. Those guys are the easiest way to move back and accumulate value. But then there's, Herbert, Lawrence, Fields, Lamar, and Jefferson, Chase. Those are the guys you got to get at least one of those guys. You want that building block, John, because exactly. We talk about that a lot because you don't want to just come out of this with just a ton of picks. And that's not what we're teaching at all. Like a lot of guys are like, hey, I got 8 first-round picks. And I say, what's your core asset? And they're like, well, my best player is Christian Watson. Ooh, it's going to take a while to build this thing. Like, as much as we love that 24 class. And I know when you did yours, I mean, it's about getting that core asset ideally at the quarterback position.
Yeah, you definitely still want to have a couple of centerpieces because if you think about these rookie drafts, right, and you want to be starting to compete in, let's say, year 2, sometimes year 3, well, these guys are still developing. They're not going to necessarily be able to compete versus your Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen's. Getting a top QB, I think, is a fine piece to build around. That's what most of these punts do. They have like one rock solid QB, and then maybe one of your rookie picks that you're accumulating, you end up getting your QB2, right? You might even consider vacating the QB2 position like we've talked about to shed points. But yeah, someone like a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase right now, love building around those guys. Like ideally though, Dad, if you can start with a higher pick in the draft, and if you're doing derby like we do in Smash Leagues, select the highest one you can, and then you may want to consider trading down at least once and still getting that centerpiece. I had one punt where I traded back twice, and somehow, I think you remember this one, still landed Justin Jefferson. Yep. So I'm still late in the first. I already have 2 firsts, 23 firsts, and Justin Jefferson. It's kind of wild how it can sometimes play out like that. So that's kind of what you got to be thinking about. But yeah, get that centerpiece.
Right now, we have a cheat code. I have been screaming it from the rooftops. Kyler Murray is literally a cheat code for this. both of these guys, both Rich and Andrew, both got Kyler Murray. The idea there is, I put that in my tweet. I put in my blueprint out there. I said, you want one of those quarterbacks in the first round, Jefferson, Chase, Wilson, Lamb, or Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray gives you the flexibility to move back. I mean, the one guy went and he moved from 105 to 107 to 205 to 302 to 304 and got Kyler Murray at the 304, collected 3 firsts on top of it. So he moved from
beautiful
Herbert, right, to Kyler Murray. I mean, John, Kyler Murray will be a round 1 startup pick in 6 months. At minimum.
Once he's back on the field, he's back to being a QB1 and a top 12 asset. Yeah.
He's that guy. And I keep getting blowback. People are like, yo, Dad, you really believe in Kyler Murray that much? Why wouldn't you? Like, we've been doing it all off season. Over his career, he's been QB4, QB5. He's been a top 12 quarterback year in, year out. Even if he's not with Arizona, he's going to be somewhere else that could be even better. I mean, Kyler Murray in this situation is where you can move back multiple times. As long as you get him in that late second, early third, now you're at a spot where you got a core asset, but you move back. And that's the key. Like when you do these year 1 punts, John, you're trying to say, you know what? And I talk about it a lot with Adam Armour when we talk about, like finance with it. It's the dollar in your hand versus what people want right there. They want time versus money. Everybody wants that asset right now, right? So everybody's interested in moving from Justin Fields up to Joe Burrow. And then they're, they want to move up and then you move back from Burrow to Fields. And then everybody's like, oh, I want to move from, Deshaun Watson to Justin Fields. So then you get yourself another first. And then everybody wants to move from, the early third to where Deshaun Watson is. And then eventually you start to look at your assets and you're like, man, this is deep. This is crazy, to a point where like in Smash 3, I ended up coming out with all 12 firsts plus multiple 24 firsts. And it's just a fun process as far as you kind of get that set up. My question for you is, and this is where people always ask me, is again, last year we did it. We knew we were getting Bijan. We talked about it with the rebuild. I mean, how much more special is this by when you move off of Justin Herbert, collect 3 firsts, and then know that your first is now Caleb Williams if you're trusting this process?
Yeah, that really is what I would suggest for all punts that are going to build around the 24 class is leave open your QB2, play the process out, similar to what we talked about in the rebuild episode. Make sure you lock in that 101 and you're locking in really what will be the most prized rookie pick since Trevor Lawrence. And I know this sounds like a little bit too much hype, but maybe even better than Trevor Lawrence. Like, in other words, could potentially go in the first round of startups. So that 101, locking that in, it's definitely going to be more valuable than Bijan was this year. And I love Bijan. So keep that in mind. If you can kind of help yourself in the startup by not necessarily paying up for that QB2. Now, look, you may be in a situation, and that's why I think it's important to be looking at each and every draft in and of itself and getting inputs from guys like us and Patreons. But you may just see, like, I can't pass up the value on this QB right now. It'd be stupid for me not to take him. That's fine. Go ahead and make the move, but then you're probably going to find a QB needy team that's pissed off that you just got their guy and traded off your team, right? Because what we're trying to do is keep those potential points low, and vacating the QB2 spot for the eventual Caleb Williams is a beautiful strategy to build around. I kind of like Kyler and Caleb, right? Imagine that combo.
It's beautiful. Now, can I'm going to make a slight alteration there because this is something that I've been looking into a lot more is we always create the void at the running back position. Creating the void at the QB2 is actually, you're still scoring points off your bench because that is that super flex position.
They're plugging in someone else. Yeah.
So I've kind of switched a little bit where, like, Rich's team, he took Justin Herbert, got Kyler Murray, and he's still going to get Caleb Williams. And in the other situation, I believe he also got, 2 quarterbacks in that area, actually got Aaron Rodgers really late, which we're going to talk about, and still going to get Caleb Williams. You get into this area, right, where if you have Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray's perfect because you're not scoring points too many into that area. Yeah. And then you add Caleb Williams, people are like, well, what do I do with him then? I mean, dude, you got three top 12 quarterbacks. That's not a bad thing. And as well as I do, like, I don't try to keep 3 of them. Then you get to an area where it's like, okay, now I can flip Kyler Murray for now I can go ahead and move him for Jahmyr Gibbs plus next year, because that's where the quarterback position is going to be. And I think, you're going to be an embarrassment of riches when you talk about having that many quarterbacks. There's never a thing in Superflex where you have too many quarterbacks. Your point, which I love, is everybody. Now this worked out, and I've done 5 of these now in the Patreon. Mm-hmm. If you guys want that, DM me. And 4 of the 5, we've been able to say, dude, it's a year 1 punt. Let's do it. Because my biggest thing when I do draft assistance with people is, what do you want out of this? You want to win now, year 1? Do you want to do a 1-year punt? Do you want to consolidate? Everybody's like, oh, I want to do that year 1 punt and have 12 firsts like you did. And they're like, okay, all right. It might not work, but you're going to get a couple, And I think the tricky part is so many people, Zoltan's, talking about it. We're talking about it. So many people are trying to do it. And you get into some of these drafts, like in Smash 8, we had 3 guys trying to do it. And I know in Smash 5, there were multiple guys trying to do it. Right. So let's talk about that a little bit, because you almost have to become the bully there and say, hey, I'm going to punt harder than you. Or do you zig when they zag? I think that's the hardest part, right? And I know you came in that same situation. You were collecting, I think you had 3 at one point. Another guy had 3 at one point. And
that's right.
In the draft is the best time to do this, because I talk about it a lot, where people are like, well, I'll just draft. Like you talk about 1 through 4, those guys, everybody knows who they are. But they're like, I'll just draft Justin Herbert at 5 and then trade him. But once you draft him, it's a different game, right? Like somebody might want Lamar, somebody might want to move up for Jefferson. So I know you were able to look at a position where it was like, okay, I'm going to start trying to push in, because I'm going to push harder than this guy into the punt.
Yeah, that is exactly what's happened. I've done a couple of punts now, and I've been in situations where, as I'm sizing up all the other teams, which is an important tactic to take, I could see that someone else was also trying to punt. You don't have to show your cards right away. Like, a lot of people are trading down anyway, and maybe they're picking up rookie picks and not necessarily going to go for an all-out punt. But yeah, I could see that I was competing versus another punt type of team. Well, what I ended up doing, going back to my earlier example with Justin Jefferson, is I moved Justin Jefferson to that other guy for a ton of assets. And by doing that, I for sure locked in the 101 and probably the 102, which is exactly how it played out in this case. So it became almost like a splash move there in the draft, where you went from, let's say, 3 firsts to 6 firsts by kind of coming over the top. And yeah, it is kind of bullying your way. It's the exact opposite of going all in on a contender. You're going to go all out on the other direction.
All out. That sounds funny, right? I'm all out. No,
I'm out, baby.
And I love it, because it's like a lot of people are like, well, I have this player, I have that player. While the draft's still going, it is the wild, wild west, right? Like, everything is on the table. So you can't really get set in saying, I have this player, they have this picks. Start talking to your league mates. This is the time, especially in a year 1 punt. We talk about it with the rebuilds. But John, I mean, when you're in these year 1 punts, you become a target, right? You're the guy that says, you know what? They know I'm going to move back every single round.
To you. Yeah.
And they're going to come to you.
That's right. You want to be the go-to for everyone to trade up with you. And you're just like, all right, well, here's the cost this round. And by the way, I would certainly also include 25 rookie picks as well, right? And
we even talk
easy, cheaper in many ways. I still kind of like the idea of maybe like it's like a 2-year build, 2-year punt, if you want to use that term. And picking up a bunch of the future picks. So you want to be the only game in town where you accumulate everything. If you think someone else is kind of trying to go into, you almost kind of want to buy them out. Trust me, you're still going to come out ahead. And what you're really doing is sizing up the other teams. Like, while I love the Thanos thing, having all 12 first round picks, I may not even necessarily use them all. Yeah, because again, maybe 4 or 5 of those could be QBs. Well, okay, now you actually are in a position where you're going to have to move some of those back off your roster. I even ran into some of those challenges too, because I had so many. So what you're trying to do, obviously, is size up the teams early on and go for the rookie picks where you think the team is likely going to be in the bottom half of the league, right? You can probably tell who's going to start contending right away. I think you remember this going back to our punt. I did not want to trade for your pick. Why? Because I knew you're probably going to take it down, and you did. And I had other people who've been trying to trade me your first throughout the season. I'm like, not as interested. right? Because I'm staying away from those, let's call it picks 10, 11, 12. They're not as interesting to me. I'm really trying to hone in on who I think those top 4, 5, 6 picks are going to be. Those are the guys I'm targeting proactively as well, right?
And you can tell who those guys are early. I mean, that's a fantastic point. I remember that fondly because you're like, I don't want your pick. You were like, a first is worth a fifth, but yours is worth an eighth. And I'm like, come on, man. I got one in here, right? So, and you were right. There's a big difference between that. And the key is, we had a guy who he's like, hey, I'm interested in moving up here. So I said to one of the Patreons that I'm helping, I said, hey, that guy's team right now is in round 3. He doesn't have a single quarterback, and he took Jackson Smith and Jigba as like in the late third. And I'm like, go get his first, right?
Exactly. There's your priority.
He doesn't know what's up yet, so go get his first. So he wanted to move into the 5th round. So I said, all right, well, sell him your 5th, get his 10th and his 24th first. And he's like, well, there's some nice assets here. And yes, and that's the key with this. Like once you commit to the punt, there's some nice assets there, but what you're doing is paying it backwards instead of paying it forward. You're like moving yourself back. Now that 24 first will likely be worth more. Right now, the 24 firsts are going for late 5th to mid 6th. That seems to be the range. But we talk about that right now. How many guys are going in the top, 4 rounds of a startup right now? And next year's class we're talking about is going to be almost the same.
Quite a number.
Right now, there are 6 in the first 4 rounds. The 5th round, there's 2. We start to really add in some assets here and next year we're going to be in that same area. So if you get 5 firsts, likely 2 of those guys are going to be guys that are, worth somewhere in that round 1 to round 5, and they're only going to build up. My biggest thing is we're not trading picks straight up for players in the draft straight up for picks. I believe firmly in insulating these trades. And last year, if you look at, I have a tweet that's going to be coming out. I got Devonta Smith, last year where I got him in the 5th round in like February, 5th or 6th round. And I moved back from the 3rd, got a 23 first and added that on there. That 23 first became Jackson Smith and Jigba and Devonta Smith. And the guy that he ended up taking was Devontae Adams. That is massive. Like you don't understand what those kind of things. Another one, done. I moved from the 4th to the 7th and got Amon-Ra St. Brown, a 24 first that ended up being Quentin Johnston. And then he ended up getting Deebo Samuel. Like these trades don't make sense now, but in February we were crushing those things. Now's a similar type area. And that's where I keep talking about people is we want to move ourselves into those core rounds, right? Like round 1, who can increase in value in round 1? The answer is no one. Like maybe Justin Fields moves up a spot or 2. Maybe Lamar Jackson moves up a spot or 2. For me, I'm really honing in particularly into rounds 4 through 7. But I put a thing out there, the best guys that I think, I give them a shout out every single week, but bulletproofff.com, they got that ADP out there. And I'm looking like the best assets we have per round. For me, round 2, Garrett Wilson, you could throw in there Waddle and guys like that. But I think people that are going to increase in value in the 2nd round, they don't move a lot. I think it's Garrett Wilson. I think it's Deshaun Watson, possibly Anthony Richardson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave maybe a little bit. But these guys are almost priced at where they should be. It's round 3. We get to Kyler Murray and Breece Hall. Right now, John, Breece Hall has just become an absolute screaming buy.
Huge value.
Right? Yeah. Like he was going at 208. Now I'm seeing him fall to 305 to 308. And John, this is my RB2 in Dynasty. Everybody's saying, hey, did that change with Dalvin Cook there? No. Like this just created a buying window where he doesn't have to be on the field right away. We're not going to have a situation like J.K. Dobbins where now they're going to ease him back in. And, oh, by the way, John, he's off the PUP list the day after they signed Dalvin Cook. So I think we have a situation where Breece Hall, just like Kyler Murray's my biggest quarterback buy, Breece Hall is my biggest running back buy because now he has a lot of people have him as their RB6 in Dynasty. They have him behind, Jahmyr Gibbs. They have him in that area behind Christian McCaffrey. And this guy is absolutely special.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Breece Lightning a little bit too. I think other than Kyler, he is one of the best punt targets. Again, because he, number one, is already an incredible value. He's going to accumulate value from here, right? But also it looks like with Dalvin Cook there, he's not going to necessarily get the big workload, especially early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting an asset that's going to accumulate a ton of value. Let's say that you get to a point, though, when you actually were originally planning to vacate running back for your punt, and you have Brees on your roster, and he starts balling out and dropping points. Well, he's accumulated all this value. Maybe you move him at that point. That's fine.
Yeah.
But you're capitalizing on that move.
Well,
And yeah,
value is value, right? It's like,
right,
so
value's
we're
value.
taking, people are asking me the same thing, John. I love you said they said that because people are like, well, what, you said no running backs. I didn't say no running backs. I say ultimately we want to avoid at the running back. But if Travis Etienne falls to the late 5th, then you take him and then you flip him. And I think
be smart about it. Yeah,
we
take
talked
the value.
about this a lot. Yeah, you move into a rebuild mode similarly, right? Like you've done it in Smash 5, and I've done it in 3, and a couple other ones there, where it's like once the season starts, it's a different variation of a rebuild, right? Like the best thing to do last year, as I traded Amon-Ra St. Brown for Brees Hall plus, because Brees Hall is injured. He's going to get you 0 points. Yeah. I think there was a situation. I think I traded, I'm not sure the exact name, but it might've been like DJ Moore for Cooper Kupp last year, because people are going to want to win. You trade for those assets that are injured, like immediately. That's where
you pounce on it. Yeah. You're really active, right? And you could still vacate the position by having running backs that are putting up goose eggs every week because they're hurt, or who knows, maybe we got somebody that's holding out, whatever, you're not putting points on. So you're still able to shed all these points. You may move them later in the year, but again, you've accumulated value. So you're just making smart moves throughout, capitalizing on value, capitalizing on tradable assets, right? I did that a ton where I'm like, well, this guy's not going to be on my year 2 roster. I have no doubt. I'm just going to actively work it, and try to sell high on any given asset. Again, you're trying to make a profit, right? So any of those scenarios could mean you're picking up another pick, you're insulating a trade. So don't be afraid to just capitalize on the value, even if it doesn't fit your team strategy exactly to a T, or who cares about your roster construction either, right? You don't even care really year 1 too much. And so, grab the value and then trade it later for a profit, maybe a pick.
Yeah, we talk about it. So we've said we're trying to acquire that core asset. We're trying to liquidate assets by tearing down in our insulated trades. So where do you want to move? And that's what everybody keeps asking, right? So it's like, third round's nice because I do think a lot of guys could increase in value. I think Kyle Pitts, T. Higgins, Tua, Devonta, those guys can increase in value for sure. Jahmyr Gibbs, I see a lot of those guys have potential to move up, but still pretty pricey. For me, it's rounds 4 through 7, John, where you are really you're making your money. You're on there and you're like, okay, this is what I have to do. And what I've been trying to do, and you guys heard it before where we talked about those consolidation draft strategies. Yeah. I've combined the two, and now, John, it's like perfect storm kind of thing, without Mark Wahlberg and that horrible beard he had in that movie. We're into this area where now, you start to move back, you start to add up, and then you get to a situation like I had with Andrew where it was like, he's like, dude, I want Jerry Jeudy, and I was like, well, Jerry Jeudy goes in that 5th round, and that 5th round is a hotbed, right? If you want to do a 1-year punt, this is where you want to live in rounds 5 and 6, and get yourself there, because we have Christian Watson at 503, Quentin Johnston at 507, Jordan Addison 506, Jeudy at 507, DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, Treylon Burks, George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk, and Jameson Williams, Zay Flowers, these guys in that area who are likely going to increase in value and move into that area. So he said, after we did his draft, he got Kyler Murray in the 3rd, and that was the only pick. And he's like, hey, Dad, I don't know about this thing, man. It doesn't feel right? Yeah. I got one player, but I was like, you have one player, but you have 5 firsts through 3 rounds. Like that's 6 players if you look at it that way. So he goes, well, I really want Jerry Jeudy. I said, all right, then let's throw one of these extra picks that we added in here from the 6th round in the late area, add a 12th to it, move up to that, 501 area, and then he ended up getting Jerry Jeudy. And then if you look at his draft, he got Jerry Jeudy 412, Christian Watson 503. He ended up getting Jameson Williams, Zay Flowers, Marquise Brown, Deontay Johnson, and oh, by the way, now 11 firsts. So it's like now he has 20 core assets in the first 10 rounds. We talked about in the consolidation, we want to have 13 players inside that top 10 rounds. John, I'm now converting it a little bit for the rebuild. I want to have 15 assets in those first 10 rounds.
Yeah, that's really the consolidation strategy to a T. And what you're obviously doing is you're trading back where you can, accumulating picks in those rounds. Again, you might come to a situation where you actually make the pick because the value, you can't pass it up. But in general, you're trying to cluster picks there. And it really does take some patience, especially for win now contender types like me. Like, you are pick after pick, you're just like grinding it out, because typically those are the guys you're trying to grab or trade up for. And you're like, I've got one guy in my roster. Everyone else now has 5 guys. Next thing you know, though, you've got 15 and everyone else is kind of looking at your roster like, wait, what happened? What's going on over here? Like, I only have 8 guys. He's got 15.
That's exactly what happened. I know when you did the draft, you called me multiple times. You're like, Dad, I don't like this.
Like,
I don't like
it. Through it.
It doesn't feel comfortable. And he said that. And now, now that he's in round 8 and he has 7 wide receivers and a QB1 and 11 first, people are like, yo, this is like wizardry. Like,
what just happened?
How did you do this? Like,
genius.
And you just sit back and you let it happen. And Rich's draft is similar in the same way. Like, he's literally loading up on these picks. He's got 7 of them. He's got a better set of core assets overall, where he's got, he ends up getting both Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray and all these wide receivers, and he's been loading up. And John, what we look at is, we want to get out of those. We want to mitigate risk as much as possible, and we want to get as much draft capital as possible, because insulated trades add the draft capital. We get into those areas that we want. And I think when people say it's a year 1 punt, they think it's blind, right? They just think it's trade back, trade back, trade back. It's trading back with strategy. Like, I don't want to trade out of round 3, like where I can get Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyle Pitts, T. Higgins, and trade into round 8 where my choices are Derek Carr, Deontay Johnson, and Christian Kirk. Look at your ADP. Don't just blindly make a trade, because, I mean, if you say you move from Kyle Pitts to Calvin Ridley and you got a first, great. If that isn't 105 or better, you lost. You know what I mean? Like, that, you got to work into those areas where you want. And for me, it's at round 5 to early 6 where you can get Ayuk, you can get Watson, Addison, Quentin Johnson. And I have several, check my Twitter account. I have a whole list of these guys, that these are these wide receivers you got to buy before they blow up. Last year it was Devonta Smith. It was Amon-Ra St. Brown. It was Drake London. It was JSN before it happened. Yeah, Garrett Wilson. I mean, there's so many guys there that just blew up. And what I've been trying to say is, we're trying to move ourselves into rookie and sophomore wide receivers. We're trying to move ourselves into running backs with new situations and quarterbacks. And I'm going to pull up a bunch of these wide receivers, that we're talking about in this situation. But what I want you to talk about is, you are a strategist on the other side most of the time. You're like, okay, when you're in the draft, you see that guy doing the year 1 punt. You can tell he's doing it. You can tell. How do you, as a win now team, how do you approach that guy? And how do you, ultimately, we're playing chess, not checkers. How do you beat that guy in this situation?
Right. So I think that when you identify someone like that, it's better to try and make a move early on, because what you're trying to conceal is that, you might be going all in and contending year 1. Well, you don't necessarily want them to know that yet, right? Because then they're going to devalue your pick. But usually I'm trying to offer my 24 first. Sometimes I might even be packaging my 24 first and second. And getting a series, kind of like splashy type trade up type move, where you trade up in front of somebody. Maybe you're trading into the first round of the startup, or you could potentially move up multiple times. And
as a win now team, if you're given your first and you're going to win, because John, when you do it, you're going to win. So you trade for the 604 and take J.K. Dobbins or George Kittle or Jared Goff or a guy like that. And that guy's like, oh, cool, I got a first. I moved into that area. But that first is late, and that's not the same. Like, there's such a huge difference between, like you said before, buying that guy who's going to be the 103 versus buying that guy who we know is going to be 110, 111, 112.
Right. So you're trying to keep your cards pretty, close there, so you can make that move before they realize. Like, if you've already drafted like Travis Kelce and you've got these aging assets. You got Devontae Adams on your team. Like, this guy's going to look at you and like, I'm not as interested now in your 24 first. So there is some strategy to that. So I usually am pretty aggressive, and I make those kind of moves early on once I identify, or sometimes I'll even float the idea to a team. If I see a trade back or two, like, hey, what about just me sending you this asset your way? I'm kind of trying to figure out what my strategy looks like, but I want to make this move right now. I like the guy on the board right here. Just keep those conversations going early on and try to make an early aggressive move, see what you can do to capitalize on it. And that's usually the way I like to go about it.
Yeah, and you could even give those guys, the going rate for a first is a 24 first for a sixth. You can give them a 25 first and kind of get it in there, because sometimes people really just start selling assets or trying to just move out of there. And, I've been with guys that have accumulated 924 first, but like the rest of the core assets, you're like, well, this is going to take a while, so get into that area. So move into those areas. For me last year, like I did 2 of these, and I got these guys in almost every single one. Round 4 through 7, it was Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson was going in the 6th round or 5th round. Chris Olave was going in the 6th round. Tony Pollard was going in the 8th. Ramondre Stevenson was going in the 10th. And it's like, we talk about it a lot at Smash Accept Break, trying to, establish who those guys are going to be. And that's huge. You want to get into those areas because Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to increase in value. Quentin Johnson is going to increase in value. Jordan Addison's going to be there. The part that I'm getting a lot of people are like, oh, I really had to have that guy. That is not an aspect that you can go into a year one punt feeling like, right? Like you don't want to, don't want to trade back, because you sit there, you move back, you accumulated 3 firsts. Now all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I want to go up and buy.
That's right.
Kyle Pitts. You can't now, right? Like you can't go the other way and just start buying up. You can move a little bit, you can consolidate, but once you start trying to move up, like that's where you start.
You got to commit to it. Even in season, I'll throw that out there too. Like you will get some trades that are very, very tempting, right? But the problem is if you're just going to dump a bunch of new points on your roster, you're hurting yourself and your own pick, right? So you really have to kind of resist those trades throughout the full season of the first year punt. But I'll come back to what you can do is what I like to do is not necessarily in this case, if I'm contending, I may hold on, I may trade my 24 first to move up and then sit on my 25 first so I can use that in season. I'm using my 25 picks in season and I'm trading them to other teams for another key piece that I needed. Maybe I lost a player somewhere. So if you flip it now during the season, rather than trade for guys that are going to be putting points on your board, you're really trying to send as many other players as you can to get more 24, 25 picks, right? So you're playing it the opposite, the whole all out strategy, if you will. And I like that all out.
Oh yeah, I'm all out. The other one I get asked about, and they're like, Dad, you always talk about insulating with first. You can insulate with seconds too. It's still a thing. Like now, but once you move past round 6, then we talk about moving back for seconds. And even if you just look at last year's second round, I mean, you would look at George Pickens, Desmond Ridder, John Mechie, Jahan Dotson, Trey McBride, Damian Pierce, Rashad White. We have Alec Pierce. We have Brian Robinson. Who else is in that area? Like Dulcich was going in the 3rd, Sam Howell. This year's class was loaded in the seconds, and the 24 class is loaded in the 2nd round. So don't just look at those. You have to look at what's on the board. So a guy just said, hey, I'm up and Michael Thomas is the best player available. Would you sell that straight up for a 24 second? Said not quite yet, but next round I would, because if he's the best guy, I think Michael Thomas is close. I think Trey McBride was in that area. You got to look at so much on there of like, this is what's happening right now. This is where we're at. Would you trade this player for a 24 second? It just becomes common dynasty, but everybody just starts looking at numbers, right? And that's what we're here for, to help with in the Patreon, where it's like, is this pick worth it? Is this value worth moving around here? And, these 23 picks were great. The 24 picks, John and I are getting excited about them already because we got so excited for 23 picks. We bought them all. I'm back in on 24s right now. Like, who's a guy that we didn't cover a ton, but you're like, this guy's going to get first round buzz and I'm just going to be all over him.
Yeah, and I'll start with some of the running backs because I think that's key. I think a lot of you guys that are looking at punts will likely want to vacate that running back position. You're just reducing your risk anyway, right? I mean, the most likely position to get injured, even if you're getting some young guys, is at running back. But there's some guys that I really do expect maybe could creep into the late first, but certainly like day 2 picks next year. Trevion Henderson out of Ohio State, I really like a lot. He's a guy I think you could build your running back position around as a future RB1. Raheem Sanders out of Arkansas, I have is right kind of like 1B. But there's some guys that no one's really talking about right now outside of like Debbie circles or like the smash guys. Trey Benson from Florida State is one of those guys. Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. And there's 2 guys at Michigan right now. Everybody kind of knows the guy Blake Corum because he was getting a lot of buzz last year in the stats, but there might be a running back at Michigan even better. Donovan Edwards, keep an eye out for that. There's Will Shipley out of Clemson as well. And there's probably going to be some guys that burst out in the scene. So if I can already rattle off, 6, 7 guys that I really like from early film and some of the stats and analytics I've looked at, you're putting yourself in a good position to get some of those guys in next year's rookie first. And like you just said, some of these guys are going to slip to the second round next year. So these are assets that will accrue in value throughout the next year, and you could build your running back core around next year. And I do want to come back to another thing, though, because I think this is a money strategy. Be smart on the players you invest in. If you just are maniacal about only drafting young players, you could miss it, right? So you mentioned Michael Thomas a minute ago. I know I've thrown this one out there on the pod before, but going back to my punt, I'm staring at Michael Thomas. I have actually clustered a couple of picks, and I think I'm in the 9th or even the 10th round. And I actually went bang, bang, Michael Thomas, Calvin Ridley. And everyone's like, whoa, what's he doing with Michael Thomas? It makes no sense at all. I thought he was basically clearly punting. He's got all the picks. Why take an aging veteran? Well, he was hurt at the time. I had a feeling he was going to come back. He might put up some points, and he did. You remember this? Like 2-3 week period. I sold Michael Thomas for a 24 first. And just a couple weeks ago, I sold Calvin Ridley for a 24 first. So now we're talking about 2 9th, 10th round startup picks that I got first round rookie picks for, right? So
that was beautiful.
Yeah. That's what you want to do. So those are the kinds of players you want to target. I mean, again, I loved Calvin Ridley. Everyone's passing on him at the time because he was suspended. So you got to find those guys that are either injured or suspended that nobody wants. You're going to just watch them fall in that startup and then bam, just snap them up, trade them for a profit.
Yeah, and that round 8 through 15 is tough. I mean, for me, it's like you want to get as many guys in rounds 5, 6, and 7 in that wide receiver core, but there's diamonds in there. Like I put guys, my favorite guys for a punt in rounds 8 through 15. Round 8, it's Brock Purdy. Like, let's stop. We know he's the quarterback, and he's so cheap right now. I mean, what he did over the back end was fantastic. Round 9, you got some of my favorites: Kendre Miller, who's going to get an opportunity; Devin Achane, who's literally the biggest winner of the other day, of the free agent signing, because Zeke goes to New England now, and Dalvin goes to the Jets, and now all we got to get past is Kareem Hunt, who sounds like Minnesota, and Leonard Fournette, and then we got a guy who could be an absolute steal in your rookie draft. Sam Laporta goes in round 10, another guy that's got tremendous upside. Dulcich was going round 12. John, I'm seeing, because Adam Troutman started in the preseason, that Dulcich is going rounds 12, 13. Khalil Herbert in the 12th, Sky Moore in the 13th, McBride in the 14th, Nico in the 15th. But John, once we get to the 16th, and I keep yelling this from the rooftops, it's running backs. Stop investing in wide receiver 5s of a team.
You should have already have them by now, right?
Yeah. So like 16 through rounds 20 or through rounds 20. Jalen Warren, Jerome Ford, Kenneth Gainwell, who I've been saying I think is going to be the Eagles' top running back when it's all said and done. Still Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Spiller, Malik Davis. Like, invest in running backs, and everybody's like, well, Dad, that makes no sense. That's not what you said. And I said, okay, so let's look at this scenario, right? So you invest a round 20th pick in Isaiah Spiller, but Austin Eckler goes down and Spiller becomes the starter, or a round 18th pick in Kenneth Gainwell. And now all of a sudden, Swift and Penny are down, and you got a RB2. Then you flip him. then you flip it. You say, I paid something in that 16 through 20 round that's worth a third. Now I'm going to flip him for a second and I'm going to win. And then I'm going to get a little bit of pieces on top of that. It's a matter of like, once we start the whole process, once you start the rebuild and the punt, then you got to be active. You got to understand, you got to look at your points possible. And you and I talk about that all the time. I think that was one of the biggest struggles when you started your year one punt is like, it becomes fun, right? But you're like, how do I think in a process of, I got to get this all out again?
Yeah, I'm all out. And the thing I will say about this late round running back strategy that I love about, I'll take it one step further. So obviously, if you can get a guy that becomes the starter and you got him for cheap, you're trading him. Boom. Be active. Give him to the guy that just lost his running back. Take the profit. But the other thing I'll say is, if they're sitting there on your roster and they're still the backup, they're not doing anything to your potential points. You don't have to worry about it too much. And one step further, look at contracts. Look at running back contracts. Look who's in their final year of the contract. Very few running backs are getting re-signed these days. So if you're the RB2 on any NFL team, again, you're looking at a year ahead, maybe even 2 years ahead. You want to stash some of these guys that could become the starter next year when you're through your punt. So actually study those contracts. I like some of the guys that you rattled off would be good targets in that range. So that's another thing to kind of consider there. And again, I mean, between stashing some of these guys that could be the guy a year from now, and you're looking at all these rookie picks where you can get your Trevion Henderson, Raheem Sanders on your roster, you're going to be fine at running back.
Yeah, that's what everybody's worry is. They're like, John, Bijan and Gibbs aren't in next year's class, but there's still guys there. And they said, well, oh, by the way, you know, you just loaded your team with 8 wide receivers who are going to be, at least 6 of them are going to hit because we've calculated it out. We know who those guys are. How many guys are worth over a 24 first right now? Like, it's in that 6th round. You know, you start looking at these running backs, and there are probably 15 running backs who are worth more than a singular first. You know, you get to Cam Akers in the 8th. Yeah, I'd rather have a first. You know, you get to DeAndre Swift in the 7th. Yeah, I'd rather have a first. You know, like, it's all the way up in that 6th. I think it's like J.K. Dobbins, Dameon Pierce, Miles Sanders, Derrick Henry area where you're debating it. So it's only like 15 to 18 running backs you can't buy with a singular first, even if it's late projected. So like, you get 7 firsts and you have these wide receivers. Now you're in a spot where it's like, I can do whatever I want. These are capital. Don't just look at it as running backs don't always hit. Rookie picks don't always hit. You know what always hits, John? Draft capital. It always goes up. It always hits if you use it.
Bet. It's a sure bet. Yeah. I will actually throw a little bonus here too, like coming back to tight ends for a minute. I do absolutely love your suggestion to go get Sam Laporte in the 10th. If you could somehow get Dalton Kincaid in the 8th, maybe you take him in the 7th.
Yes.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And I got him in all mine too. I love it.
Well, and you know, these guys in tight end premium are going to be gold mines eventually, right? But the nice thing is a lot of times tight ends do take a little while to develop. So they're year one. I mean, these guys are actually going to probably drop some, but a lot of these young tight ends aren't going to hurt you on potential points in a punt very much. But the real kicker for me is don't worry about veteran tight ends too much, because the guy coming next year, Brock Bowers, will absolutely be the best tight end rookie prospect since Kyle Pitts. And I know it's going to sound like hype, but I'm already starting to see the hype building that he can end up being a better prospect than Kyle Pitts. So think about that too. Like, you could have your future tight end 1 with a top 5 rookie pick next year. Brock Bowers, remember the name.
I love it. You know, when we talk rebuild, when we talk punts, you almost have to turn your volume down when I'm talking, because I get excited. I know you get excited. So this has just been fun. John, the regular season's right around the corner. Mung and Snoog and I are we're gonna do a draft right after this. So it's like,
love it,
man. I'm just so excited. We're right around the corner. This is that time of year that we live for. Love chopping it up with you. Any closing parting shots here?
No, I'm really pumped as well. I think a lot of our pods are going to start shifting more towards in-season and redraft, but there's a lot that we could chop up on the Patreon or on Twitter around punts. Definitely reach out. I love sharing strategies and kind of what we've learned along the way. That's what we're here to do, is help build the community and just have a lot of fun with it. Trust me when I say, if you've never done one, jump in and try a punt. For me, what it meant was I was really focused on all the incoming rookies. Now I study rookie film. I track throughout the college football season. I'm going to be doing it again for Smash. You can trust my process. Of course, humbly speaking, I don't have it all figured out. I'm learning from a lot of the folks that come on our pod that do this like professionally. And I'm always trying to take in all these inputs and give you like the best set of rankings and kind of give you the updates that you should know about with respect to college football and incoming rookies. So I'm going to do that all year for the 2024 class. And I can't wait to do that as well. So as excited as I am for NFL, I also cannot wait for college football season as well. Ready?
It's not
set,
that far away.
Smash.
I love
Let's
it.
go.
Guys, we're doing that in the Patreon draft assistance. You know, right now we're offering 10% off if you guys do the yearly. It's going to blow up. You know, obviously they're going to do things like start, sits, and everything for your redraft needs too. So, you know, check that out, guys. That's, you know, at patreon.com/smash accept. Thanks again for tuning in and enjoy the process.